Alright guys, the next topic is structural directives. Structural directives are directives that let you add or remove HTML elements from the DOM. And we are going to learn about the three common built-in structural directives, namely ngIf, ngSwitch, and ngFor. The first two directives, that is ngIf and ngSwitch, are used to conditionally render HTML elements, whereas the ngFor directive is used to render a list of HTML elements. Let's take a look at the ngIf directive in this video. Let's go back to Visual Studio Code, and you can see that I have created a new project called Structural Directives. Again, I've added a test component, and within the test component, we have an h2 tag in the template that says code evolution. And let's say we want to use the ngIf directive on this h2 tag. So within the opening tag, use an asterisk and then ngIf. To this, we need to assign a truthy or falsy value. Let's begin with a straightforward true. So now if we save this and take a look at the browser, we can see code evolution. And if I inspect the element, you can see the h2 tag within this app test HTML tag. Now back in our code, if I change true to false, save this and take a look at the browser, code evolution is not visible anymore. And what you need to keep in mind is that the h2 element is removed from the DOM itself. So in the elements panel, you cannot identify h2 tag within app test HTML element. And this is different from setting the CSS display property to none, in which case you will still be able to see the element in the DOM. Alright, this is the basic usage of ngIf directive. Star ngIf, assign a truthy or falsy value, and that conditionally renders that particular HTML element. However, setting true or false on the right hand side is of not much use. So let's assign a property value instead. I'm going to create a new property called displayName and set it to true. And to the directive, I'm going to assign displayName. Now if you save this and take a look at the browser, you can see code evolution. And if I change displayName to false, code evolution is not displayed anymore. So now by making use of a property, we can add or remove the element in the DOM by toggling this displayName between true and false. And that can be done easily with button clicks or any other events. But the bottom line is you have more control over rendering this particular h2 element. Now, a common thing to have with an if block is an else block. So let's take a look at an example to see how to implement an else block for the ngIf directive. Now I'm going to add a new h2 tag that says name is hidden. So basically, if displayName is set to true, I want code evolution to be displayed, else I want name is hidden to be displayed. And here's how you do it. Bear with me for a couple of seconds and I will explain what is going on. First, I'm going to wrap this else part with an Angular specific HTML tag, which is the ngTemplate tag. Next, I'm going to reference this ngTemplate tag with a template reference variable. Let's call this else block. Now back in the ngIf directive, I'm going to add a semicolon and then else followed by the ngTemplate reference, which is else block. So let me explain how this works. First, it checks if displayName is true. If it is true, the element to which the ngIf directive is attached will be rendered in the DOM. If displayName is false, however, Angular checks if there is an else statement. In our case, we do. Now it checks which HTML element needs to be rendered. In our case, it is the else block. And what is the else block? It is a reference to this block of HTML. The ngTemplate tag is basically like a container for other elements that the ngIf directive can use to properly add or remove blocks of HTML from the DOM. So when execution flows to the else condition, this block of code will be rendered in the screen. So if we save this and take a look at the browser, you can see that name is hidden, which is the else block in our example is rendered in the browser. Alright, next let's take a look at another syntax that Angular provides for the ngIf directive. Now if you notice, the directive is in line with the HTML block that needs to be conditionally rendered. But with the alternate syntax, you can have the directive in a separate tag. So let me show you an example. First, I'll create the if block and the else block that has to be rendered. And again, we use the ngTemplate tag. Now for the if block, I've given a template reference variable of then block. And for the else block, I've given a reference variable else block. Let's add HTML to both these blocks. Code evolution for the if block, hidden for the else block. Now we can add a new HTML tag that contains the ngIf directive. So let's add a div tag and then the ngIf directive, so star ngIf. To this we assign a value, and this is going to be display name. Now after this, we are going to add a semicolon followed by the keyword then, and then block. Semicolon again, else block. And here's how you read it. If display name is true, then render then block, else render else block. So right now our display name is set to false, so the else block will be rendered. So if we go back to the browser, you can see that hidden is displayed. And if I change display name to true and take a look at the browser again, you can see code evolution is now displayed. Well, that is how you use the ngIf directive. In the next video, let's take a look at the ngSwitch directive.